So I decided I'm going to start a new series on my channel called the Handful of Things series. In Texas, 5 of anything's called a handful. So this will be where I show you 5 really important somethings. And we're going to start it off talking about mixing live snare drum. So let's jump in. So today we're looking at the drums off my band's song, Giving Up on Giving Up.
Slow down, quit wasting your time, find beauty in life. Our clock is
and we're going to be following my 5 steps to mixing live snare drums. This could easily transfer over to being how you mix a raw snare drum sample, but when it comes to drum samples, you just got to know that a lot of them come pre-EQ'd and pre-compressed and aren't in a raw state like what we're starting with. So it can get really weird really fast. So just keep that in mind. I'm a firm believer that there's no rules in recording and there's no rules in mixing, but just know that going in when you're working with drum samples. So we're going to jump in at the part you just heard, which is the chorus, and dive into our handful of mix moves for snare. So step number 1 is bussing your top and bottom snare tracks together, leveling them out, and then our first plugin we're opening is DRUMLEVELER. DRUMLEVELER is a really crucial part of my drum sound. It's not only used for the leveling aspect, but also as my gate. So if we look here, I already have these tracks leveled. You want some of that snare bottom mic because I really like the rattliness of it, but you don't want too much of it. Snare top is the star. They've been bussed together to this snare live bus, and we're going to open up DRUMLEVELER. So you can see I have my compression set at 80%, and my gate I will set to ear, just gating out as much as I want cut out. So let's take a listen. You don't necessarily need to gate the entirety of the signal out. I don't really like the way that sounds all the time. It can get a little too unnatural sounding. You just got to get your target level right. You got to get your low threshold right so you're not picking up anything else. And that's all there is to DRUMLEVELER. Number 2 is I do 2 EQ stages. One being a creative with something like a SSL or an API EQ. And then I have a Pro Q2 to cut out any harshness or gross frequencies I'm not liking. So let's look at the SSL. I have a 13 dB boost at 4K, and I have a 10 dB boost at 174. Then I have a high pass filter around 100 just to keep the rumble out. You could easily dime that high knob and it'd still sound pretty good. When you add all that high end in though, you got to add some of that body back to it. We're essentially mid-scooping this, which is what you want, and we're going to take it a little bit further with Pro Q. As you can see, I'm not shy with how much I'm cutting here. Usually the first thing I'll look for is this 400-ish honkiness. That really separates out the fundamental of the snare and takes away that boxiness. 300, this was just a little more of it. Sometimes you'll see you have 2 humps, kind of where the body of the snare is. So we got one here, we have one here. I'm just kind of taking away from that one a little bit. And the last thing is, to me, 750 is not nice on snare, and I'll solo it for you so you can hear this. So, I mean, if you listen now that I've soloed it for you, you can really hear it. So all of these add up to a nice, another level of mid-scoop. So we got that body and we got that top end sounding really good. My next step and you're gonna see we're gonna skip a plugin here, is compression. And for that, we're using the Kush Tweaker. So if you take a look here in the middle, that's a gain reduction meter, and it goes from bottom to top, so you can tell how much gain reduction is happening. It does not have a number. It doesn't give you a number of dB that you're compressing. So you gotta use your ears. As you can see, I'm driving in pretty hard. My mix knob is at 50%, and I have a slow attack and a fast release. So let's take a listen and we'll punch it in. So getting a lot of nice smash, getting a little bit of volume, getting a little bit of saturation because we're driving into it so hard. But what we're bringing back is a little more of that bleed. For step number 4, going back one plugin spot and throwing on Pro MB and using the expand function on the top end to try and kill some of this bleed from the cymbals. So we're doing 12 dB of gain reduction on the high end. Fast attack, fast release. I always go hard knee just to make sure we're getting everything. And then you just play with the threshold till it's hitting just right. And what a massive difference that made. Now we're rocking into the compressor with a usable level of bleed. I like to do the compression first because it lets you know where you need to take the bleed down to after you get the character you want from the compressor. So now that that's sounding really nice, we're gonna go to step 5, which is saturation. Like I said, we're getting some of the saturation from the tweaker, so keep that in mind if you're just using a plug-in compressor. But if you've watched any of my older videos, you know I love Little Radiator. And I don't think you need to do a whole lot to this plugin ever, which is why I opened it and I left it. It's pushed, it's a little bit distorted, and I like that. It helps it cut through the mix. So let's listen to this in the drum mix. Turn all the plugins off. It's honestly not terrible. Caton's a great drummer, but this. That's a great snare sound, and it didn't take a whole lot to get there. Just a handful of steps to go from raw snare to banging snare in the mix. This album didn't have any drum samples. That's it. That's all we used. When you take the time in the recording process and you make sure your tracks are ready to mix like this, it really only takes a handful of steps. Cut your mix time down, cut out all the extra junk, and get to the next one. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, go down and hit subscribe. Leave a comment with any questions you have for me. Hit the like button. And in the description, I'll have the song we used linked. And that's it. I'll see you in the next handful video.